All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling something huge by thinking really, really small. We're talking about the one thing that connects every single living creature on this planet, from the tiniest microbe to a giant blue whale. Yep, we're talking about the cell. So let me ask you something. Just look at your hand for a second. What is it really made of? I mean, sure, you've got skin, bone, muscle, all that stuff, but what happens if we could zoom in, way, way in, past the tissues, past the fibers? What would we find at the very bottom? You'd find this, the cell. This is it, the absolute fundamental unit of all life. It's kind of like the single Lego brick that builds everything, and at the same time, it's the tiny, powerful engine where all the chemistry that keeps you alive is actually happening. And this quote, this really gets to the core of it. Think about what that means. You can't just have a piece of a cell, a part, and call it alive. Nope, you need the whole shebang, the entire package, with all the parts working together. That's the minimum requirement for life. And this is a perfect way to visualize it. See, a cell isn't just a blob. It's more like a busy, complex factory. And each little part inside, we call them organelles, has a super specific job. You've got mitochondria, right? They're the power plants, cranking out energy. But they're useless if they don't get fuel delivered. And the nucleus? That's the main office, sending out blueprints and commands. But it can't actually build anything on its own. Every single part is completely dependent on all the others. They're a team. Okay, so because this whole idea is so important, so fundamental, scientists needed a way to formalize it. They basically created an official rulebook for life itself, and we call it the cell theory. Now, this wasn't something somebody figured out in an afternoon. No way. This was a scientific journey that took centuries to unfold. It all started way back in 1665 with a guy named Robert Hooke. He's looking at a slice of cork under a microscope and sees these tiny box-like structures he calls cells. But it took almost 200 more years for two other scientists, Schleiden and Schwann, to make the big leap and say, hey, maybe all plants and animals are made of these things. Then, in 1855, Rudolf Virchow dropped the final crucial piece of the puzzle. All cells have to come from, well, other cells. So you put all that together and you get the three main rules, the tenets of modern cell theory. It's simple, but profound. 1, if it's alive, it's made of cells. 2, the cell is the smallest thing you can have that's actually alive. And 3, cells don't just magically appear. They have to come from a cell that was already there. Okay, so all life follows these rules. But here's where it gets really interesting. While everything is made of cells, not all cells are built the same way. Not even close. In fact, you can basically divide all life on Earth into two massive, totally distinct empires. We've got the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. And here's a really easy way to picture the difference. Imagine a simple studio apartment. It's just one room, right? Everything's kind of jumbled together. Your bed, your kitchen stuff, your desk. It works, but it's simple. Now, contrast that with a huge, sprawling mansion. It's got a dedicated kitchen, a library, bedrooms, a power generator in the basement, specialized rooms for every single function. That's the core difference we're talking about. So let's put some names to these analogies. Those simple studio apartments, those are the prokaryotes. Think bacteria. They're small, they're simple, and their DNA just kind of floats around inside. They don't have all those internal membrane-bound rooms. But the mansions? Well, those are the eukaryotes, and that's us. It's also every plant, animal, and fungus on the planet. Our cells are way bigger, way more complex. Our DNA is tucked away safely inside a special room called the nucleus. And we have tons of those specialized organelles, each doing its own job. But the story doesn't end there. Even within that big mansion empire of the eukaryotes, you get different architectural styles. So let's zoom in on two of the most familiar designs, plant cells and animal cells. They share a lot of the same floor plan, the same basic rooms. But there are a few key differences that change absolutely everything about how they live. And what's so cool about this is that every single difference you see here is directly tied to their way of life. It just makes sense, right? Plants can't run away. They need to stand tall, so they have a strong, rigid cell wall for support. They make their own food from sunlight, so of course they have chloroplasts. Those are the little solar panels. But animals, we need to move around to find our food. So our cells have to be flexible, which means no cell wall. And since we eat our lunch instead of making it, we don't have any chloroplasts. It's a perfect example of form following function. All right, for this last part, let's just zoom all the way back out. We've been deep in the microscopic details looking at walls and organelles. But to really, truly get your head around the cell, you have to appreciate the mind-boggling scale we're dealing with. 37 trillion. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the estimated number of cells inside your body, right now. All of them working together just to make you, you. Every one of those is its own tiny, bustling city, full of factories and workers, and your whole body, it's a sprawling metropolis made up of 37 trillion of these cities. And this brings us to one of the most incredible, most profound questions in all of biology. Think about it. If all 37 trillion of your cells started from just one single cell, and if every single one of them carries the exact same DNA blueprint, then how on earth do they become so different? How does one cell know to become a neuron in your brain, while another becomes a skin cell, and yet another becomes a muscle cell in your heart? Well, the answer to that's a story for another day.